This man in the clown suit buried 26 teenage boys under his house. His wife and children lived above them. They ate dinner, watched movies, slept in their bed, celebrated birthdays, apparently lived a very normal life, while boys suffocated in handcuffs 3 feet below the kitchen floor. Remember that one Halloween when something felt wrong? When you saw someone who made your skin crawl but you couldn't explain why? When you couldn't put your fingers on that uneasiness? What if your instinct was right? On Halloween night in 1978, a 15-year-old boy named Robert Peast told his mother he was meeting a contractor about a job. That contractor wore a clown costume to children's parties. He was beloved in his community, a successful businessman, a friendly neighbor that everybody loved. However, Robert never came home. When police finally searched that contractor's house, what they found beneath that contractor's house changed how America thinks about serial killers forever. But even after finding all 24 bodies, even after Gacy's execution in 1994, there are still questions that don't have answers. Questions about victims who were never identified. Questions about evidence that disappeared. Questions about powerful people who may have helped him. Today, we're finally talking about the theories that law enforcement won't talk about, the connections that were never investigated, and the possibility that the worst serial killer in American history might have had help. Because when you understand how long Gacy operated in plain sight, you'll realize the most terrifying question isn't how he did it. It is, who let him? Before John Wayne Gacy became the killer clown, he worked in a Las Vegas mortuary in 1962. He was 20 years old, alone on the night shift, surrounded by the dead for 8 long hours. One night, a teenage boy's body arrived, pale, cold, lifeless. He wrapped his arms around the cold, stiff body, pressed his face against the dead boy's neck. He felt something he'd never felt before. Pleasure. Pure electric pleasure mixed with shock. But if you think this was his weird curiosity, then no. It was the moment a monster discovered what he truly wanted. But the disturbing question nobody is ready to even think of is, how many other bodies did he touch in that mortuary? How many other nights was he alone with the dead before that teenage boy arrived? We'll never know. What we do know is that less than a year later, Gacy fled back to Chicago. He quit his job without notice. He never spoke about his time at the mortuary again. But that experience awakened something inside him that would eventually demand human sacrifice. The theory tells Gacy didn't just stumble into murder. There were some other events as well that shaped him. His evil journey wasn't started in the mortuary. John Wayne Gacy's father was an alcoholic. He was the person who believed love was earned through pain. His father beat him regularly. He used to call him weak, sissy, somebody who would never amount to anything in life. When young Gacy was hospitalized with a heart condition at the age of 11, his own father's cruelty accused him of faking it for attention. When Gacy tried to make him proud by working in politics, his father called him a patsy. At age 17, Gacy was sexually assaulted by a family member. He never told his parents. He buried it like an infected mound. Criminal psychologists believe Gacy wasn't just killing teenage boys. He was killing his father over and over again. Every victim represented the man who told him he wasn't good enough, wasn't man enough, wasn't worth loving. Gacy's father died in 1969, right before Gacy committed his first murder. Later on, Gacy said he felt nothing at the funeral. The one person whose approval Gacy desperately wanted was gone forever. And without that impossible goal to chase, Gacy had nothing left to prove, except dominance, except power, except control over life and death itself. And once he tasted that power, he couldn't stop. In 1972, Gacy created an alter ego. He called it Pogo the Clown. He painted his face white, drew exaggerated features with harsh lines and sharp angles. The smile was too wide. The eyes were extremely harsh. Everything about Pogo screamed danger, but people saw entertainment. Gacy performed at children's hospitals, birthday parties, charity events, Democratic fundraisers. He shook hands with First Lady Rosalind Carter. He posed for photographs with local politicians. He was trusted, respected, and beloved. But his eyes were dead. There was no warmth, no joy, just pure emptiness staring out from behind the mask. Criminal psychologists analyzed the painting after Gacy's execution. They noticed something every painting has in common. The clown's smile never reached the eyes. The face was always split between. light and shadow, good and evil. Gacy was telling the world exactly what he was. The Crawl Space Horror, 8213 West Summerdale Avenue. From the outside, it looked like every other house on the block. But beneath the foundation in the crawl space under the house, police found something that redefined the meaning of evil. The crawl space was 3 feet high, and 26 decomposing bodies were buried in that suffocating darkness. Most were teenage boys. Some were stacked on top of each other like firewood. Others were wrapped in plastic, buried in quicklime to speed decomposition and mask the smell. But the lime didn't work. Gacy's wife, Carol, had complained about the odor for years. She believed him because he seemed so normal. He ran PDM Contractors, a successful construction company. He hosted summer parties with hundreds of guests. During the final 2 years of his killing spree, investigators calculated he murdered at least one person every month, sometimes more. But the question that haunts forensic experts: how did nobody smell rotting corpses? The unidentified victims. Of the 33 confirmed victims, 7 remain unidentified to this day. Some were so badly decomposed that forensic experts couldn't extract usable DNA. Others had no dental records to match because they'd never been to a dentist. One victim, body 26, was estimated to be between 14 and 18 years old, but nobody ever reported him missing because nobody was looking. Most of Gacy's victims were runaways. Timothy McCoy, hitchhiking across the country. Samuel Stapleton walked home alone, never arrived. James Hackinson, he called mother from Chicago, never heard from again. However, when investigators asked Gacy about the final body count, his estimate was low. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy's construction company worked on over 200 properties across Illinois. In 1979, psychics contacted police claiming Gacy had dumped bodies in multiple locations. According to some conspiracy, he had killed over 50 people. Investigators dismissed the claims as hysteria, but in 2013, Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart reopened the case. His team used ground-penetrating radar to scan properties Gacy had worked on during the 1970s. They found anomalies, possible graves, at 7 additional locations, but they never excavated. Why? Due to budgetary constraints and lack of definitive evidence. The official reason was lack of funding. It was considered a low priority, but off the record, detectives tell a different story. Well, they know there's something there. If they find more bodies, they will have to answer more questions. The political protection theory. John Wayne Gacy wasn't just a businessman. He was a Democratic precinct captain. He organized fundraisers that brought in thousands of dollars. He knew aldermen, state representatives, judges. He even had his picture taken with First Lady Rosalind Carter. That photo was taken in May 1978. At that point, Gacy had already killed 27 people. But something more disturbing hides in Gacy's criminal history. In 1968, Gacy was arrested for sexually assaulting a teenage boy named Donald Voorhees. The assault was violent. Gacy had lured the boy to his home, handcuffed him, and raped him. The evidence was overwhelming. Gacy was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He served 18 months, less than 2 years, for violently assaulting a child. And when he was released early for good behavior, he moved back to Chicago and started killing almost immediately. But here's where the conspiracy theory gets dark. Multiple families reported their suspicions about Gacy to police years before his arrest. In 1975, the mother of John Budkovich, an 18-year-old who worked for Gacy, filed a missing person report. She told police her son had an argument with Gacy about unpaid wages. She begged them to search Gacy's house. They refused. In 1976, another family reported their son missing after he was last seen with Gacy. Again, the police did nothing. In 1977, Jeffrey Rignall, a young man who survived an attack by Gacy, went to police. He'd been lured into Gacy's car, chloroformed, and brutally assaulted for hours. Rignall spent weeks tracking down Gacy's house on his own, sat outside watching, wrote down the address. He brought the police everything they needed. Police told him there wasn't enough evidence to pursue charges. Why did police repeatedly ignore warnings about Gacy? Why refuse search warrants? Why do they dismiss credible witnesses? The conspiracy theory is Gacy had protection. Some investigators believe Gacy had compromising information on powerful people. His construction company did contract work for the city. He renovated offices in government buildings, worked after hours. He had keys. He hosted parties attended by politicians, judges, and businessmen. And there are persistent rumors, never proven, but never fully dismissed, that some of those politicians shared Gacy's predatory interests. Former Chicago PD officers, now retired, speak off the record about the case. "We knew something was wrong with Gacy, but every time we got close, we were told to back off. Orders came from up high. We were told he was connected. That word meant don't touch. If Gacy went down, he might take others with him. So the police looked the other way." Until Robert pieced. Robert was different from Gacy's usual victims. His mother knew exactly where he was going and who he was meeting. And when he didn't come home, she didn't stop calling the police until they acted. And that's the most damning part of this theory. Gacy may have been able to kill for decades if he'd only targeted the vulnerable. The system protected him until he made the mistake of killing someone the system cared about. Justice delayed is justice denied, and for 32 victims, justice came too late. The accomplice theory. In the final years of his killing spree, Gacy was murdering someone almost every week, which is impossible for one person to do so rapidly, but his manic mindset made him do it. But simultaneously but here the math doesn't add up. How did he have time to abduct, kill, and bury victims? Who helped him? Some criminologists believe Gacy had help. During his trial, witnesses testified that young men were seen entering and leaving Gacy's house at all hours. Neighbors reported hearing screaming from the crawl space. But when police investigated, Gacy always had an explanation. But the haunting detail that investigators can't explain is, Gacy's employees had keys to his house. Several testified that Gacy would send them into the crawl space to dig trenches for plumbing work. They said the smell was unbearable. "The smell down there would make you gag. I asked him what died. He said it was moisture and mold. I didn't want to go back down." Some refused to go back down. Did any of them see the bodies? More disturbingly, did any of them help him bury them? One employee, David Cram, lived with Gacy for several months in 1978. He later testified that Gacy once joked about killing someone and hiding the body under the house. He said, "You could kill someone and put them under the house and nobody would ever know." He laughed. I laughed. I thought it was a sick joke. But when police excavated the crawl space, they found something disturbing. They found these bodies in 4 categories. Category A, carefully wrapped in plastic, positioned formally. Category B, covered in lime, buried hastily. Category C, multiple bodies in same grave, stacked. Category D, partially clothed, oddly positioned. Even some showed signs that they were being moved after burial. All these theories pointed towards the idea that Gacy didn't work alone. At least one other person helped him dispose of bodies. But if that's true, all the employees were interviewed, but they all denied knowledge. All passed polygraphs, but an accomplice was never caught, never charged, never identified. And they might still be out there, living a super normal life, while 33 families still wait for complete answers. The river victims. By late 1978, Gacy's crawl space was full. In total, 26 bodies were there, and there was no room for more, so he changed his method. He started dumping victims in the Des Plaines River. Timothy O'Rourke, found June 1978. Frank Landigan, found November 1978. James Mazzara, found December 1978. Robert Piest, found April 1979. All found floating in the river, naked, strangled. But why did Gacy suddenly change his method? Serial killers rarely alter disposal methods. The ritual of body positioning and burial is typically part of psychological satisfaction. This change suggests external pressure, not preference. For 6 years, he'd buried every victim in his crawl space. He kept them close, like trophies, like possessions. Retaining victims in home indicates the need for continued connection to victims. Possessive behavior, control extending beyond death. Then, suddenly, he starts discarding them in a river? Well, it clearly shows Gacy was preparing to run. By December 1978, he knew police were watching him. He knew Robert Piest's disappearance had triggered a serious investigation. Some believe Gacy was planning to flee the country. But how is he going to destroy a mass grave in the crawl space? So he started using the river for new victims, planning to abandon the house and everything in it. But he ran out of time. On December 21st, 1978, police arrested John Wayne Gacy. He confessed almost immediately. As if he was relieved the game was finally over. There was no resistance from his side, just a very weird acceptance. But during his confession, Gacy said something that still haunts investigators. "I didn't kill all of them." He never explained what he meant. He refused to elaborate more. He played games when questions were asked, and used to change subjects. He never gave names, he never clarified. We'll never know what he really meant by that, because on May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. His last words were, "Kiss my ass." The monster took his secrets to the grave. And somewhere, maybe buried in Illinois soil, maybe at the bottom of a river, they are still waiting to be found and identified. Today, 7 victims remain unidentified. Families still search for closure that may never come. But what keeps me awake at night is John Wayne Gacy performed as Pogo the Clown at hundreds of events. He posed for photos with thousands of children. Somewhere in America, right now, there are middle-aged adults who have childhood pictures with the killer clown. They smile at the camera while Gacy's hand rests on their shoulder, and they have no idea how close they came to being victim number 34. Gacy performed at approximately 300 events. On average, 20 children per event were present. Approximately 6,000 plus children were photographed with the killer. How many were targeted? How many were approached? How many said yes to job offers but got away? So, this Halloween, when you see someone in a clown costume, remember this. John Wayne Gacy proved that monsters don't hide in the shadows. They hide in plain sight. They smile at you, shake your hand, offer you a job, and by the time you realize what they really are, it's already too late. But let me ask you a final question that will haunt you, so listen at your own risk. If police ignored warnings about Gacy for years, if families reported him and nothing was done, if powerful people protected him because he was connected, then ask yourself, who are they protecting now? How many monsters are hiding in your community right now? Or volunteering at your kid's school, coaching them with a big friendly smile, or just quietly living next door? Because Gacy didn't operate in darkness. He operated in broad daylight, with community approval, protected by silence. And that silence is what killed 33 people. The scariest part of John Wayne Gacy's story isn't what he did, it's how long he did it. So this Halloween night, when you lock your doors and turn off your porch light, when you tell your kids to stay away from strangers, remember that John Wayne Gacy wasn't a stranger. He was the friendly neighbor who helped jumpstart your car, the successful businessman who hired local kids, the beloved clown who made your children laugh. So this Halloween, remember, the most dangerous predators don't look like monsters. They look like us. And they're still out there, still smiling, still waving back at you, throwing parties with you. But they are still hiding, still hunting down their victims. So when you hear that knock at your door tonight, when you see that friendly face asking if you need help, when someone offers your kid a job that seems too good to be true, trust your instincts, because John Wayne Gacy's victims trusted the friendly neighbor. They trusted the successful businessman. They trusted the smiling clown. And that trust pushed you towards death. This trust made them never come home. Sweet dreams.